How are you? Welcome again. I am roasting chestnuts. No, this isn't a holiday show, and no, you're not off your schedule. I'm roasting one of the oldest food products that we know in our three ancient cultures, China, Greece, and Rome. All three of these ancient cultures, which had such drastic influence on the West, loved and love chestnuts. They're a wonderful food product. There were times in the old days, in ancient Rome, for instance, where people lived on chestnuts. You could make them into chestnut flour. I'll show you that today. Chestnut flour, chestnut cakes, you could live on chestnuts. They were so abundant that they were absolutely free. And all you had to do, you see, was go out and collect them, because once the pod opens, it means the chestnut is ripe and the chestnut falls to the ground. And you just go pick them up and you could dry them, all sorts of wonderful things. That was true in America, too. Up until about 1904, for hundreds of years, the eastern half of the United States had all kinds of chestnut trees. But in 1904, our chestnut crop was devastated by a sapling that was brought in. I think it came in from Japan, but in any case, somewhere from Asia, and it caused a blight in our chestnut trees. And by 1940, American chestnuts were very, very rare. That's a terrible tragedy because it's hard to get them started again. It takes at least 60 years for a chestnut tree to really bear fruit, and they last forever. When Mount Etna exploded, the volcanic eruption in Mount Etna in 1850, there was a tree at the foot of Mount Etna that was destroyed, and everyone felt bad because it was a chestnut tree that was 2,000 years old. It was around at the time of Christ and had been planted by Roman soldiers. Roman soldiers took chestnuts with them everywhere because they knew they'd be back, the arrogance of the Roman soldier. He knew they'd be back. They wanted chestnut trees when they returned, so they began planting trees for future troops. And they planted trees all over Europe. The Romans are responsible for that. In China, it's very interesting. During the Han Dynasty, which was about 200 BC or 2,200 years ago, the chestnut was prized. And the Chinese have eaten them and cooked with them for many, many years, generations, thousands of years. By the time the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire collapsed, excuse me, not the Holy Roman Empire, that's later on. The Roman Empire collapsed at the beginning of the Christian era. People who had nothing to eat could at least live on chestnuts. Crucial to the diet because it had a lot of starch, a lot of sweetness. A chestnut's a very interesting thing. Now, originally, chestnuts were a kind of a wheat flour substitute because wheat was expensive in those days and chestnuts were cheap. Now they're very expensive. As a matter of fact, all nuts in our time are very expensive, and they're considered great gifts to bring to people. In the middle of Athens, you can find a man selling pistachio. Oh, he's wonderful. You buy them just by little bags. They're expensive. I checked my crop there. But it's typical of the way the Europeans and the Athenians and the Romans and the Chinese see nuts. In China, you bring nuts to friends when you go for a dinner party because they're expensive. You've always done that. And look at the selection of nuts they have. Nuts are prized in Europe and certainly prized in Rome. Wonderful things. And remember that in the old days, let me show you this. In the old days, you'd buy chestnuts. It had been dried like this, you see? See how dry these are? And I just buy them in a bag. This is about a pound sack. I want you to see the size, given my hand. Here's a pound sack, you see. I picked these up at Conte de Savoy here in Chicago. You can find them in any Italian market. And then you soak them overnight in water. See this? And then when you cook them up, they're about twice the size of the little dried one once they're cooked. And then you can do anything you want with them. The fresh one, of course, well, this is the chestnut. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful fruit. No, it's a nut. It really is a nut. And they're very versatile. The Chinese have a different kind of nut that they like. It's a little bit smaller. And these I found in a market in San Francisco. So you see how much smaller they are than here, get both sizes here for you. See? And these are soaked in sugar, and that preserves them, and then you kind of eat them like candy. The Chinese don't eat a lot of sugar, not a lot of candy, but they do like sweet chestnuts. I love chestnuts. I think they're fascinating things. So I'm roasting some chestnuts for you today, and what I've done, let me show you this. This is a popcorn popper, you see? A simple popcorn popper, and let me lock this up. What I've done on the bottom is to put some holes in it. I drilled them holes. Otherwise, you can buy a frying pan that has holes in it, and you can toast them that way right over the top of your burner. See? You want to cook them over an open flame. Gas burner, of course, is much better than an electric for this, until they begin to blister a little bit and begin to split. And that means they're done. Now watch this. You see, just pick off the split, and you can peel a chestnut in nothing flat. Isn't this great? My wife, Patty, was born and raised in Brooklyn. And after school each night, well, I'm not going to stand here and eat these things. They're too mealy, and I won't be able to talk. The amount of starch is incredible. Anyhow, after school each night in Brooklyn, she would stop at the chestnut wagon and pick up some chestnuts. So when we were in New York years ago, the kids were little, Patty was very nostalgic, and she bought some chestnuts from the chestnut roaster and said, boys, this is how I was raised. Isn't this wonderful? The two boys, Channing and Jason, opened their little chestnuts. The tiny little guys, they took one bite, and then they went, pooey, and that was the end of nostalgia. You either love chestnuts or you don't. If you've been raised on them, fine. Another thing you might want to use for a chestnut roaster, top of the stove, get a pizza pan that has a lot of holes in it. You see one of these? You ever seen one of these? They work great. This also makes a great pizza because the dough isn't going to be gooey. You get a nice crust that way. Rima puts these out, R-E-M-A. It's a clever item. All right, let's cook. One of the things that you can do, and this is typical of the Greeks and the Romans, is to marinate the chestnuts before you roast them. In this case, the chestnuts have been marinated in red wine. Isn't that fun? And in this case, they've been marinated in ouzo. I should probably add some more. Ouzo is that devilishly hot liqueur, not by heat, but ouzo, O-U-Z-O, ouzo. And it's made from, that's plenty. It's made from anisette, anise. It has a licorice flavor. It's about 105,000 proof, I think. And you sit in the streets of ouzo, of Athens, and sip ouzo and drink black coffee that obviously came from Turkey. And you drink the two of these and you know that you're alive. Believe me, there's no question. Everything in your body says, I'm alive. It's wonderful stuff. Marinate chestnuts in ouzo because the Greeks love that anise flavor. But before you do that, you have to put a hole in the chestnut or it'll blow your head off. And let me show you what to do. Simply take a chestnut. There you are. Simply take a chestnut and make a little slit in the top of the nut. You see where the darker part is? Chestnuts are packed in a pod this way. Let me show you this. This kind are packed in a pod. They're about 3 in a pod. You see? That makes the round nut. Now, there's a larger chestnut in France, the Méharoun. I think, don't complain about my French. I'm not French. But they have a larger chestnut, and later on in the season, these will be bigger too, of course. It varies with the season, but the big French chestnut is very prized, very beautiful. Now, if you don't want to stand around and chop them with this, look what a guy sent me. This is one of the funniest things I've ever seen, and I have to admit it works. He loves gadgets, so he made this little plastic, look, beautiful lucite construction, and you put the chestnut in here. See, there's a little blade on it. Put the chestnut here and go pop, and that's made the cut. See? Now, you have to do that before you roast chestnuts, otherwise they're going to explode. A couple exploded here today when we were cooking. And Richard, one of the guys that helped me, has beautiful dark eyebrows, and he looked like an old man because they were covered with the puffiness of the white chestnut when it would pop up into the air. I'm glad he didn't hurt himself. Don't you hurt yourself. You must poke a hole in these when you roast them, because otherwise the steam pressure will just send you off to burn land, and we don't want that. All right. So I roasted some chestnuts. I have a big plate of these I'll put up. They're wonderful eating, and it's kind of a romantic thing, I suppose, to sit around the fireplace. And that's a great place to roast these over an open fire, and then peel them. You see, once they open, oh, they're delicious. They'll split a little bit on you, and then you're ready. And, of course, you can roast them with ouzo or wine or do any outlandish thing you like. Now, other possibilities for using the chestnut, they're almost endless. In ancient days, Apicius, during the 1st century in Rome, remember I mentioned him before, claimed that you should mix chestnuts with greens, with wild greens when you were serving them, because it would take away the bitterness. Well, of course, what he was referring to was the sweetness. You see the chestnuts in here? Was the sweetness that the chestnut offers to the greens. These are mustard greens, a little olive oil and garlic, and I put a lot of chestnuts. So I had boiled the chestnuts, the dried chestnuts first, or you can use fresh, but you have to peel them first. And that's kind of a pain. It has a very nice odor, and it's much sweeter than normal. So, the old days, chestnuts were used for sweetening wild greens, which you would get free, but they were bitter. They were very bitter. Another thing that you would do with chestnuts is to make a chestnut flour. You grind them up. You grind up the dried chestnuts. A miller would do this for you, see? Grind them up very carefully, and look at this flour. It looks almost like, like regular flour, or almost like cornstarch. Not quite that fine. And with this, you can make all sorts of things. I think that the original pizza was probably, or focaccia, as they call it, was probably made from that very flour. And I have one for you. If you saw us do the pizza show, you'll remember this dish. This goes way, way back in Rome. And the pine nuts will help you remember that it's an old dish, because pine nuts, these wonderful little bitty seeds, were precious in Roman times. Remember the songs about the great pines of Rome? Well, these seeds were very expensive, and the aristocracy, of course, spent a great deal of time munching on little pine nuts. And it makes a great pizza if you put pine nuts and some kind of herb, rosemary, or in this case we used anise, on the top of a paste made out of the flour. Now, you can also make a pasta. Let me show you a quick pasta. Get my water boiling here. Yes, it's ready. It's fine. I'm going to make pasta out of chestnut flour, and the pasta will be very sweet. Use regular whole wheat flour. Excuse me, not whole wheat, unbleached wheat flour. Unbleached wheat flour, a bit of semolina, and then about a third of the process is involved in the chestnut flour that I just showed you. Let me get a handful of this into the pot. Doesn't take long to cook. I hear tell that in Genoa, the Genovese will simply not eat a pasta al pesto that is not made with chestnut flour. And I thought that was a crazy thing. I'd never heard of chestnut pasta. So I made some. And Craig, my culinary man, the head of my kitchen, and I both agreed that it's just terrific. Very good. So we'll bring that to a boil while we go on to some other dishes. Boy, we made enough of this stuff for an army, didn't we? Always keep your pasta covered after it dries a bit. You see, we made this and then let it dry, about 20 minutes or so, and then covered it up so that we could refrigerate it overnight or keep it for you, so that when your guests come, you're not out in the kitchen grinding pasta out. You shouldn't do that to your guests. They should be ready to celebrate all the time. Okay, here's another one. Using the same kind of flour, prepare a polenta. And the polenta is, do you remember, we've talked about corn polenta. Of course, corn is an American product, and the chestnut originally was American too. They were all over this country, but we'd never used it this way. The colonists never made puddings with chestnut flour, then, to my knowledge. Try this. This is very old, goes back to Roman times. Make a polenta and then pan fry it. Oh, that one's a little dark, isn't it? How do these look? Well, they look fine. It's very sweet, and it'll be crunchy and yummy, very much like the New Englanders used to celebrate fried cornmeal mush. Try it with cornmeal, with polenta made from the flour of the chestnut. I know it looks like fried spam. For heaven's sakes, are you on the wrong channel? It is not fried spam. Pooey. No, we don't want that. It's a lovely, lovely dish, and it's very sweet. The kids will get a bang out of it. I don't think you could put syrup on it. I think you would probably die immediately, because the chestnut itself has so much sugar in it that it's just amazing. All right, that won't need much more time. Let me show you some more. I have so many dishes I want you to see. Another thing that Apicius did, it's all in his cookbook. You can find these, here they are. You can find these recipes in paperback now. The original book, which dates from the 1st century, written by this fabulous guy, who was probably, the book is probably a collection of recipes, offers this one. He cooks, it doesn't look very good in color, does it? Well, anyhow, it's delicious food. It is a dish of lentils and chestnuts cooked with a bit of leek and then some nice herbs from the old days, coriander and a shot of parsley and some rosemary. Isn't that fascinating? You could live on this because it has so much nutrition. It has so much sugar content and so much starch that a little leek, you see, you could snitch that from the neighbors and you could have a wonderful time. There, I'll find another spot here. I think my pasta is done. I don't think I should go any farther. Oh, it is done. It is done. I can see it's beginning to roll and float, so I know it's done. Let me grab a container here, and we'll haul it out of the pan. Pasta made with chestnut flour. Isn't that fascinating? Honest to God, I'd never heard of it. There. But it's very interesting, and I think it's going to be very good. I think. Well, you're going to say, how do I know? Well, I know what it's going to be, and I'm just sick always that you aren't here to taste these things. No, I don't know of any way to put us together any closer than we are, except to meet you when I'm on the road. Here, you know what pesto sauce is. Pesto is made from fresh basil and garlic and olive oil and some pine nuts, so it's an old dish. And it's very, very common in Genoa. Also some cheese has been poured in there, a bit of freshly grated Parmesano Romano. And we don't want to tear this up, so let's toss it very gently. There. And this is supposedly the original dish called pasta al pesto. It was made from peasant pasta. That is to say, in early times in Italy, you had to use chestnut flour for your cooking because wheat flour was simply too expensive. Isn't that fascinating? I was not aware of that. Let's put it in. No, that's for another dish. Let's put it in here. There we go. There. The odor is wonderful, and it's a strange, how do I explain this to you? It's a very strange contrast because the pasta is rather sweet, and the garlic and olive oil, of course, you normally say, well, it's set up some kind of a battle, but it isn't a battle. It's a very interesting combination of flavors. All right, chestnut pasta. You didn't think we'd do so much with chestnuts today, did you? But you see, it's possible. Now, another thing that you can do is to cook the chestnuts until they turn into a kind of jam. I've got a cake here somewhere. Here it is. All right. And first I want to show you what happens. If you cook the chestnuts down, and then these have been blended with a bit of brandy and some lemon and that sort of thing, and some sugar, so that you have a chestnut jam. And this is used in very flamboyant, just terribly flamboyant Italian pastries. Let me show you an example. I simply took a cake, a pound cake, and filled it, cut it into 3 pieces, you see, and then I got to get a plate to put this on. Here we are. Here's the cake. There we go now. You ready? And then filled it with the 2 layers in between here with chestnut paste. Let me get that out of the way so you can see it. Isn't that gorgeous? Isn't that gorgeous? There. Now, then I soaked the layers. You can still see some of the rum and orange juice dripping through there. Butter icing, little chocolate and almond on top. It's very typical of that kind of rich stuff that a good Italian grandma would want to serve you when she's glad that you came over to say hello. I don't have an Italian grandma. That's one of the dumbest things I ever arranged in my life. My grandma wasn't Italian at all, but she was a neat lady. Terrible cook. Oh, Lord, she was awful. But I've told you before, she was a member of the state legislature and old wobbly. Boy, would she be upset with today's politics. I don't even want to hear from her. I can imagine the noise. Just imagine the noise. I want to heat my wok as we go on to another bit of chestnutting. And actually, from here on in, it's all a lie, because I want to show you some dishes. Oh, no, we'll do the Chinese one first. The Chinese dish of beef and chestnuts. That's not a lie. The one I'm going to lie to you about is something called a water chestnut, which is not a water chestnut. At least it's not a chestnut. But it is an aquatic fruit. We'll show you that one. Here we go. All right. I'm going to put in my Chinese casserole. You can use any kind of casserole you like. About 3 pounds. This is shall I tell you what I'm cooking first? Beef and chestnuts. Chinese chestnuts. Dried just like the Italian kind. As a matter of fact, the Chinese import them from Italy, and the Italians import them from China. They go back and forth. So the same thing. Put in about 3 pounds of beef that you've browned. See this? Come on, get in there. There you are. 3 pounds of beef. This is just stewing beef, good stewing beef. I always buy a chuck roast and trim my own. That way I'm not paying for a lot of extra fat, and I can control the fat content in my kids' diets that way. See? It works. All right. Then we want 1/2 pound of chestnuts, dried chestnuts that you've soaked up the night before. Leave the water in the bowl. You don't need the water, you see? That's 1/2 pound soaked in ample water. And remember, they're going to swell up, so put them in a large bowl. Now, we'll make a sauce, and the sauce does it. That's basically the only 2 big ingredients other than the sauce. Let me get a bowl here for us. Okay. Now, for our sauce, I want to, let me find the recipe for us, because I don't want to blow the sauce on you. I want you to be able to remember this one. I got this from Ken Hom. You ever seen his shows? He comes out of England, though he's a Chicago person, and he's just charming. He really knows his food. He's very Chinese. All right, I want a tablespoon of hoisin sauce. There we go. And I want about 4 tablespoons of Chinese rice wine. We don't have a bonfire over here. Chinese rice wine or dry sherry. 1, 2, 3, 4. Terrific. And to that, I want to add 4 tablespoons of light soy sauce. Remember, we've talked about the difference between light and dark. Light soy sauce looks more like a wine. There we go. That's 4 tablespoons. I want a tablespoon of garlic that I've already chopped up or diced very fine. There we go. About a tablespoon of garlic. And I want 1 whole star anise. Star anise are fun to cook with. Gives your food a little bit of a licorice flavor. You see that? It really is shaped like a star. Isn't that interesting? All right, into the pot. And finally, a very interesting herb, which is called Szechuan peppercorns or Figara pepper, and it's really not a normal pepper. Roast these in a frying pan, as I've done just for a minute. You want about a tablespoon of these, and you can actually a teaspoon will do you. Tablespoon probably too strong, and crush them up if you like, or I just throw them in right now. I just haven't time to do all of that for you. Stir all of that up. Goes into the pot, along with, there we go, along with 4 cups of water to cover, and then you cook that on the top of the stove. Use a regular stovetop casserole and let that simmer until everything is tender. Now, it doesn't look very colorful yet, but I have one in the oven for you, all ready to go, as always. As always. Because I want you to relax when you're cooking and say, if Smith can do it, he's not so smart, I should be able to do it. So Chinese cooking is not complex, though it is certainly some of the most profound cooking in the world. Here we go. This is the chicken cooked with chestnuts. There we are. Here it is. Ugh, that's a little hot. Let me get the lid off for you. There it is. That's just delicious stuff. And I have a similar dish, very close in terms of structure and flavor, and that is a chicken and a chestnut dish. Not water chestnuts, regular chestnuts. Ouch. That's a little bit lighter in color, isn't it? And it's lighter in flavor. Beef is heavy. So in this one I have beef and chestnuts, and in this one I have chicken and chestnuts. Now, there are some other wonderful things that you can do with chestnuts, and I'm not going to have time to cook the shrimp for you, I don't think, but I want to show you some other things. There's a dessert. Craig, can you get me the Peking dust? There's a dessert from China. Well, we're going to try the shrimp. Why not? We'll cook them as we close out today. There's a dessert from China that's simply beautiful. Thank you, sir. It looks like a mountain, and inside is a very delicious pile of let me cut a spot here and you can see it. Way inside is a delicious pile of chestnuts mixed with whipping cream. There, can you see this? And this is a classic Chinese delicacy, only for holidays. See, it's a mountain of chestnut and then a mountain of cream. Now, the French do this too. Exactly the same dish. Flavoring's a little bit different, but they do it too, and they call it Mont Blanc or something like that. A very elegant sort of thing. You can also cook with another kind of vegetable, and it's called a water chestnut, but it's really not a chestnut. This is the water chestnut, and this is a regular chestnut. I don't want you to confuse the two, but I'm going to do it now. I'm going to confuse you. This is the regular water chestnut, and this is the chestnut, you see. They are not the same vegetable. But if you buy them fresh, and this is what they look like. You know the old dish, cooked beans with green beans with water chestnuts? If they're fresh, instead of those silly canned things, they're just delicious. Just delicious. And finally, it's very common to use the water chestnut flour. Let me show you what that looks like. As a kind of seasoning and coating. It doesn't have much flavor, but it gives you a wonderful crunchiness. For instance, here's some shrimp, you see? And I'm going to coat them. You just buy this in a package, a water chestnut flour. You can find it in any Chinese market. Get my wok hot here, and I need to add some peanut oil. Very hot pan. Remember the rule? Hot pan, cold oil, foods won't stick. I want to put in a pinch of salt and a bit of ginger. This is called shrimp with water chestnut flour and gin. And I want a little bit of garlic. Really very dramatic and I think very delicious. All right, everything's good and hot. So we'll toss that with the paddle here. Don't ever try and cook with a wooden paddle in your wok. Toss your gin in the flour, and as it cooks, it will form a wonderful crunchy coating that is very typical of good Chinese cuisine, cooked with water chestnut flour. Today's lesson, then, is the history of the chestnut. Please remember that it was common in all of our three ancient cultures. And look what you can do. Roasted chestnuts, of course, but chestnuts with greens, or chestnut pizza, or how about chestnut pasta, or a chestnut-filled cake. Wonderful things. Or a beef stew made with chestnuts, or a mountain of cream and chestnuts. Finally, I have some water chestnuts that were cooked with green beans. Oh, and the chicken dish, too. Don't forget that. Let me turn my shrimp. I don't know if we're going to make it or not, but you have an idea of what we're doing. So, when you next time you see a chestnut and it's Christmas time and you're thinking good thoughts, remember that they fed the world for a long, long time. This is the Frugal Gourmet. Until I see you again, I bid you peace. Bye-bye.